Welcome to the Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Ancient wisdom, modern life, and the way. Visit us online at taoananda.com or find us on all the socials. Now, the Modern Taoist.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of, if I don't fall out of my chair, the Modern Taoist. My name is Kit Man, and as I record this, we're just 4 days away from Christmas Day, or 3 days away from Christmas Day in 2025. And the year has just, flown. I stopped counting how many episodes we were doing. When I first started the podcast, I would put episode 1, episode 2, or whatever. And that felt like an important thing to me. And as we've gone along, because in a very Taoist way, I realized that keeping track of the episode numbers was pretty silly and pointless. And why would we do that? And so now I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, but I don't know. I don't know. But I do that a lot with things. You know, I think I've brought it up before. My teacher was very, very old dude. He was Chinese. He was he used to call himself converted, but he had been a Zen Buddhist for 50 or 60 years. And I don't know, I never got to the root of what happened. He got disillusioned or something, but he was very, very strict philosophical Taoist by the last 20 or 30 years of his life. And I couldn't even hazard a guess to how old he was when I first met him. I would say in his late 80s or early 90s. I'm not sure. And the reason I'm not sure, and I again, forgive me if I've told this story, but I asked him one day, how old are you? And he said, I have no idea. I don't know. I said, how could you not know? How could you not know how old you are? And he said, because nobody ever told me. And I thought, and that was my first lesson in labels, right? Like we don't know. He didn't know how old he was because nobody ever labeled him with an age. When you cross, one of the comparisons I've always made is when you cross into another state. Let's say you're driving from California to Oregon. And if you're on a back highway and you're not on I-5 or something, if you're on a back highway and you cross over from California into Oregon and you're not paying attention, or there's not a sign or whatever, you don't know you're in another state. You have no idea. You can get out of the car and nothing has changed for you. You don't know you're in another state until somebody labels it for you. And that label could be you see a highway patrolman from from the other state, or you see a sign, or you see different license plates, or whatever. Until someone or something informs you that you are in another state, you don't know. And that state can be also an internal state. You can have a literal physical state, the state of Oregon, or you could have an internal state of being. And if you don't know what state you're supposedly in, are you actually in it? That doesn't really have anything to do with anything other than the fact that I don't know what episode this is because I stopped labeling it. Labeling is a big lesson. I think many, many, many of us. And that's not what we're talking about today, although in some ways it is. But I wanted to bring that up at the beginning because labeling something and saying this is how it is has always confounded me. Because it's how it is according to the label, not how it necessarily is according to reality. And I think we all need to make that a thing in our lives of labeling something. Some things you have to label. I get that. We live in a world where you have to quantify things a lot of times for your work purposes, or, when I play golf, I don't keep score really by myself, But there are times when I need to keep score because I want to maintain my handicap so I can participate in events and things like that. So there are times when where I need to keep score. If I'm playing with somebody else, everybody always wants to keep score. But if I'm playing alone, I very rarely actually keep score. I don't want to label. I want to label the round. Did you have a good round today? I want that to be something that feels organic. Yeah, I had a great round today. Or no, not really. I wasn't playing very well. Not because of whatever number is on the card. And it's I just think it's an interesting conversation for you to think about and have today as we move on. And I don't even know why I brought up Christmas a little while ago. I'm already off of that. So, but if you're listening to this before Christmas in 2025, or maybe you're picking it up in the holiday before the New Year, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, whatever you celebrate, happy it. Okay. Happy it. Everybody's like, it's a war on Christmas. No, it's not. No, nobody's warring against Christmas. I promise you, it's not happening. It is just happy it. Okay, whatever it is you celebrate. Today on the show, I would like to talk about something that I feel very strongly about, and something I feel very qualified to talk about, and something that I think that more of us need to pay attention to, because something has shifted in how authority is experienced right now. And if you are a parent, you feel it. If you are a manager, you feel it. Teachers, coaches, leaders of every kind feel it right now. You can give clear instructions, explain your reasoning, even act with the best of intentions, and it still feels like no one is actually listening. We have a problem in our house, and I think it's a problem in many houses, where you feel like you're talking to a wall because attention spans are directed elsewhere. I've literally had to say, let's all put our phones down. Okay, pay attention. I'm trying to speak here. I'm trying to get something across. It's a lesson you need to learn, and you staring at a screen while I'm talking it's not getting it through. No one's listening. Not really. There is compliance sometimes, right? They may do what they're supposed to do, but there's no respect there. Most people reach for more force when this happens. Louder rules, tighter control, more explanation, or they go the other way, backing off entirely and saying, well, I'm being flexible or I'm being kind. Taoism would tell you that both of these moves miss the point. When authority fails, it's rarely because the rules were wrong. It's usually because the center is not solid. Children don't disrespect authority because they're rebellious by nature. Employees don't tune out their bosses because they hate structure. People stop responding when the person in charge feels unstable or inconsistent or, more often than not, performative. Taoism has always understood this. Tao Te Ching doesn't talk about leadership as command. It talks about leadership as orientation. When others can settle in your presence and feel they have to pay attention. And this is where modern leadership, in my view, has broken down. Because we've confused authority with position. We've confused parenting with instruction. Leadership with charisma. Taoism doesn't care how correct your values are if your life doesn't reflect them. It doesn't care how calm your words sound if your reactions are chaotic. People watch what you do under stress. They track your consistency. They notice whether you're able to restrain yourself before you try to correct. And then when you do have a moment, as we all do, where you spin out of control just a little bit, you get a little frustrated or angry or a little self-absorbed or whatever it is. People notice and they don't worry because they know you're going to pull yourself back. The hardest truth here is also the simplest. You cannot lead where you have not ordered yourself. Not at home, not at work, not anywhere. Taoism doesn't offer techniques to control other people. What it asks is whether you are someone others can trust to be steady. When the parent or the boss at work or the leader lacks steadiness, authority collapses. Respect drains out of the room, and no amount of explaining or demanding is going to bring it back. Excuse me about my voice again today. This episode, I want to talk about Taoism and leadership, but not in an abstract, philosophy book kind of way. I want to talk about why children stop listening, why teams at work disengage. I want to talk about what Taoism actually says about leading without becoming passive or authoritarian. When authority breaks down, most people assume the problem lives inside the people that are being led. Right? Inmates are running the asylum. Kids are disrespectful now. Employees feel entitled. Nobody wants structure. No one wants to listen. Taoism would say that diagnosis is backwards. Okay? Authority does not collapse from the bottom up. And it doesn't collapse from the top down. It collapses from the center outward. Children and underlings are not confused by who has power. They know that. You know who your boss is at work. Kids know who their parents are. They're not confused by who has the power. They're confused about whether that power is grounded or not. They can sense when a parent or a leader is improvising, reacting emotionally, shifting standards depending on their mood or their stress or their audience. And they may not have a language for it, but their nervous system registers this immediately. And once that happens, once their nervous system gets a hold of this, their respect becomes conditional at best. And this is where modern leadership culture goes completely wrong. Completely. Like, I disagree with a lot of things that are being done in the world philosophically. But one thing that I vehemently wish that I could get in front of more CEOs and leadership and teach is modern leadership culture is completely wrong right now. Because we've trained people to manage optics instead of coherence. We've trained people to manage to say the right things, model the right language, apologize publicly, perform emotional awareness, but none of that creates authority if the internal state of the leader is disordered. All of that is shallow. If the person that is leading is disordered, uncentered. Taoism doesn't care about the appearance. It cares about the alignment. Whether your actions as a leader, as a parent, as someone in charge of whatever it is you're in charge of, whether your actions, reactions, and decisions come from the place every time consistently. Think about how kids test boundaries, okay? They don't do it to be defiant. They do it to find stability. They want to know where the edge is. The same thing happens in organizations. Employees will test policy. Teams will challenge decisions, not because they want chaos, but because they're trying to locate something solid. Tell me where the edge is. But when that edge moves every time, when the response depends on how tired or how stressed out the leader is, that trust erodes. A Taoist leader understands this instinctively. The Tao Te Ching says when the leader is steady, the people will correct themselves. And that line gets misread and misunderstood all the time as being something permissive. But it's not. It's about containment. About the leader being the fixed point that does not need to prove itself. When the center holds, you very rarely need corrections. That's why it's called the center. What destroys authority the fastest is emotional leakage. When your frustration spills out as sarcasm, when fear shows up as micromanagement, when insecurity turns into moral lecturing, children are especially sensitive to this. They know when a rule is about order versus about when it's about the parent trying to regain some kind of control. They know it instinctively. They don't have the words for it. They don't know how to describe it, but they feel it. And that same dynamic plays out at work. People stop respecting the role and they start managing the person. How many times have you felt before you go into a meeting with a boss, I've got to manage this situation. I got to word things in a specific way. I've got to say things in a way that I know I can get what I need out of this meeting. The reason that you have to do that is because your boss is not a centered human being. Right? So you have to manage that person. You don't respect the role anymore. The Taoism will always place responsibility exactly where modern leadership avoids it. The responsibility is on self-regulation. Before you correct behavior, you have to correct your own state. Before you can set rules, you have to embody rhythm. This is not softness, it's discipline. It is harder to remain consistent than it is to punish people for stepping outside of a boundary they didn't know existed because of the boss's inconsistency. It's harder to stay measured than it is to explode. It's harder to model restraint than it is to demand obedience. Here's the truth that most parents and leaders don't want to face. You cannot ask for respect while demonstrating instability. You cannot demand patience while being reactive. You cannot teach regulation when you yourself are dysregulated. This is Wu Wei, the art of Wu Wei, the art of not forcing. But that phrase is misunderstood because it doesn't mean doing nothing. It means not adding your own chaos to someone else's life. Authority in Taoism is not loud. It is gravitational. You can be hard, you can be strict, you can be light and easy if you are grounded. Because people orient themselves around you because it feels reliable. When the tide, here we go with water, more Taoist water stuff. You ready? When the tide comes in, does the water move or does the shore? When leaders lose that quality, children act out, teams disengage, and everybody starts improvising their own rules because you're the shoreline that is moving all over the place. One of the biggest misunderstandings about Taoist leadership is the belief that restraint equals weakness. That if you're not constantly correcting, constantly reacting, or here's the big one, asserting yourself with authority, people believe that means you're being permissive or disengaged. This misunderstanding shows up everywhere. In parenting, it gets labeled as I'm being too soft. In leadership, it gets framed as having a lack of authority. Taoism is the complete opposite. Restraint is not about absence. It is control held inward instead of being sprayed outward. When rules exist but are not enforced, that's pacificity. When rules are spoken but not embodied, when the leader avoids discomfort and calls it harmony, that's pacificity. Taoism has no respect for that. The Tao Te Ching repeatedly warns against weakness at the center. A leader without inner discipline does not create freedom, they create confusion. When I have had moments, and I believe that I am a very centered, quietly confident father, parent, leader at work. I believe that I am. I believe people have said that. I believe that I have a history of this. But I have my moments too. Everybody does. And when I have a moment where I get frustrated or that little outward I can see the looks on my wife's face or my kids' faces or the people at work. I can see the looks on their face where they're like, what is happening? Because they never see that from me. Children understand intuitively when a parent reacts. Children learn that emotions drive the system. So they begin reacting. They begin managing the parent instead of respecting them. But when a parent is restrained and consistent and clear, then children feel safe and contained. They might still push a little bit, but they push differently. They're testing structure. Okay? They're not looking for openings. They're not fishing for reactions. They're just simply testing the structure. That happens. Same dynamic, though, plays out at work. Employees do not trust leaders who constantly explain themselves. They do not trust leaders who justify their decisions. They do not trust leaders who emotionally react to any pushback. That behavior signals you might as well put a flashing sign over your head. Hello, everyone. I am insecure. And you're telling the people that the leader needs agreement in order to feel stable. Over time, any respect that people had for that leader erodes. And the authority is then a performance because people are behind their back going, yeah, whatever. You've been in a meeting where everybody's just nodding their head, but they're completely disengaged. Taoist leadership does not argue for authority. It inhabits authority. That doesn't mean silence. It means precision. When a correction happens, it is measured. When boundaries are set, they are clean. When decisions are made, they are made. They do not wobble under pressure. This is why Taoism emphasizes simplicity in action, not in appearance. Few words, clear moves, no excess. A common mistake parents and leaders make is believing that they must be emotionally transparent at all times to be authentic. That's silliness. Taoism disagrees. Authenticity does not mean unfiltered expression. It means alignment in your inner state and your outer action. If your inner state is reactive, dumping it into the environment does not make you honest. It makes you unstable. Restraint protects the system. It allows emotion to be felt without being weaponized. It allows authority to remain intact during stress. This is especially important with kids. A child that sees a parent remains steady during conflict, learns regulation through that observation. A child who sees a parent unravel learns that chaos, no matter how gentle the words sound, is still chaos. That's why Taoism says, be a leader, not a boss. Don't lead with rules. Lead with being. Lead with your tone, your pace, your consistency. These things teach more than lecturing ever will. A leader who can pause before reacting creates space for others to regulate themselves. A leader who cannot pause forces everyone else to push their hands against the wall, bracing for what's about to happen. There's a quiet confidence that comes when you are restrained, and people know this. Be the person that does not need applause. You don't need compliance to feel valid. Your children, your family members, your people at work, they'll thank you for this internally. They may not say it out loud, but over time that trust will settle in. But again, we get to the problem where most of us had bad leaders in our lives. We didn't learn leadership by watching it being done well. We learned it through absence or overreach or inconsistency or fear. We learned it from parents who are ruled by their moods, from households where authority means control instead of guidance. Or we learned from the opposite, homes where no one was held to the center, where everyone learned to fend for themselves. Those early patterns do not disappear just because we grow up. They get carried forward, and then that same thing becomes true in the work environment. Many of us had bosses who ruled through intimidation and volatility and constant pressure. Others had leaders who avoided responsibility entirely. In both cases, something critical was missing: orientation. A sense that someone was actually holding the system together. And when that is absent, people do not learn how to lead, they learn how to survive. Taoism is very blunt about this. What you grow up around becomes your default. Not intellectually, but physically, in your nervous system, in how you respond to stress. When it becomes your turn to lead, to parent, to manage, those patterns surface automatically unless you have taken the time to examine them and correct them. Self-examination, self-correction. This is why you'll hear so many people swear they will not repeat what they experienced. I will not do what my father did, and so they go the complete other direction. And then as soon as that pressure shows up, who do they turn into? Some repeat the control. They become rigid because rigidity feels safe. Others repeat the avoidance. They hesitate to set boundaries because boundaries were once weaponized against them. Both styles come from the same open wound. A lack of stability in authority is modeled early on. Taoism will tell you, here we go, I'm going to give you a tree. I'm going to give you a Taoist tree. When the root is damaged, the branches grow crooked, no matter how well-intentioned the gardener is. The root was damaged. And this matters because leadership is not a clean slate moment. You don't suddenly become neutral and wise because you're now in charge. You bring everything with you, every unresolved reaction, every distorted lesson about power, every coping strategy you learned to keep yourself safe. You bring all of that in with you, and children and teams feel this immediately. They respond not to your role, but to the emotional weather that you're carrying when you walk into the room. Many parents discover this the hard way. They hear themselves say things they swore they never would say. They react with a sharpness that surprises them, or they freeze and withdraw when firmness is required. The same thing happens when you become a new leader at work. Under pressure, they either clamp down or disappear. Both of these things feel justified in the moment, but they undermine your own authority over time. Taoism places a heavy responsibility on leadership, on the person in the role. And that responsibility is not to be perfect, but it is to be aware. If you were raised under poor leadership, that history needs to be confronted. You need to understand it. You need to examine it. Not blame it, not excuse it, examine it. Otherwise, it's going to run your show. It does. Wu Wei does not mean letting old patterns play out. It means not adding unconscious force to a system that is already under strain. This is why self-examination must then turn into self-cultivation. Because this matters very much in Taoist leadership. Before you can correct a child, you have to notice what you are reacting to. Are you reacting to their behavior or your own old fear being touched? Before you confront an employee, you need to ask whether you are enforcing a principle or simply relieving your own anxiety. These questions are uncomfortable, but if you want to be a leader, you have a responsibility to make these questions necessary. Because without them, leadership is simply a performance. It's a reenactment. People who were ruled poorly often mistake authority for harm. They hesitate to step fully into it. They soften everything, or they over-explain, or they avoid conflict. Others mistake authority for dominance, and they go the other direction. When they step fully into it, they become this bully. Taoism says, we got to reject both of those. Taoism doesn't ask you to erase your power. It asks you to refine it. When it becomes your turn to lead, you are no longer just reacting to the past. And you may be one of these people that say, look, I have no desire to lead. Okay, that's fair enough. A lot of people have no desire to be a boss at work, but do you have kids? Because I got news for you. If you have kids, you are a leader, whether you like it or not. So when it is your turn to lead, you're no longer just reacting to the past. You are shaping the future. Children will learn how you handle frustration. Your teams at work will learn how you respond to a disagreement. What you tolerate will become the culture. What you repeat will become the norm. It's not philosophical nonsense. It's practical. And Taoism will tell you and insist upon the fact that leadership is transmission. Whether you intend it or not, something is always being passed down. So what are you passing down? Clarity or confusion? Stability or reactivity? Orientation or fear? And at work, this is not theory. It happens in moments of pressure. This is where Taoist leadership starts. Not with fixing other people, but refusing to hand the future over to your unresolved past. Balance is where most leadership collapses. Like I said earlier, leadership collapses from the center outward, not from the top down or from the bottom up. Why is that? Because balance cannot be enforced. It has to be cultivated. Has to. You cannot force people to be balanced. You cannot force people to be centered. It has to be cultivated. Parents and leaders get stuck swinging between correction and permissiveness, thinking that there's this right magical recipe that will finally make people behave. No. No. Balance doesn't come from calibrating rules. It comes from you being a model of proportion. Correction is necessary. Anyone who says otherwise has never led anything real. Children need guidance. Teams need standards. Systems need edges. But correction without space is a pillow on the face. Trademark, copyright. Put that on a t-shirt. Correction without space teaches compliance without understanding. People behave only when they're being watched. And that moment that pressure lifts, the behavior disappears. This is not about leadership. It's about containment through force. The greatest compliment any of my upper leaders ever gave to me. President of a company who didn't particularly like me, by the way, brought me into his office after I'd been on vacation for 2 weeks. And I thought he was going to fire me because it happened in the radio business quite a lot. You'd get fired for no reason. They sold the radio station or something would go haywire. Didn't happen to me, though. He brought me into this office, and I thought, here we go. And he said, I'm going to give you a compliment, and I don't hand out compliments very lightly. And I said, okay. He said, you were gone for 2 weeks. And I didn't notice because everything ran so smoothly. And at first I thought to myself, what do we need Kit for? And then after having a few conversations, it's because I realized that you have established a culture here where people can work on their own and don't feel like you have to be there every moment for them to do the right thing. And I thought, wow, that is a compliment. Thanks. Balance is the key. Correct behavior without colonizing identity. Guide direction without dictating your beliefs. Hold standards without demanding ideological agreement. This is where modern leadership gets all messed up. Too many leaders want agreement. They don't care about alignment. They want others to think the right thoughts instead of acting the right way. With coherence. Belief cannot be forced without breaking trust. You can require conduct. Sure you can. You cannot require inner conviction. People will do it because you tell them to do it. That's performance. They have no conviction. They have conviction when you are centered. When parents try to control how a child feels instead of how they act, resistance gets harder when that happens. When leaders try to mandate values instead of modeling them, cynicism takes root. People comply because it's the rule, but they disengage from the job. Guidance towards balance looks differently. It's correction paired with explanation only when that explanation actually helps. It is allowing emotional expression without allowing emotional chaos. A child can be angry without being cruel. An employee can disagree without undermining the system. These distinctions matter. Taoism is about enforcing them calmly and consistently. This is where example becomes more powerful than instruction. When people watch you correct without humiliating someone, they learn how to correct themselves. When they see you allow disagreement without collapse or without getting angry, they learn that they can express themselves without attacking or feeling attacked. Balance, my friends, is absorbed. It is not taught. It is mirrored. But it takes time. Many leaders fail right here, right at this point, because they're trying to manufacture the outcome. They want immediate buy-in, immediate harmony, immediate proof that they are the boss. Taoism says you got to be patient. Balance develops slowly through repetition and consistency. It requires trusting that people can grow into proportion when the environment supports it. Guiding others towards balance also means tolerating a little bit of discomfort. You got to let your kids make some mistakes. You got to let your teams have room to experiment and fail. Overcorrection kills initiative. Undercorrection erodes standards. The leader's role is not to eliminate tension, but is to keep tension productive instead of destructive. Taoism doesn't try to make everybody the same. It allows differences while maintaining order. That's hard. It requires the leader to stay out of an ego battle, to resist the urge to be right, to correct what actually matters, let the rest go. Not because it's unimportant, but it's because too much force will break the flow. I had a guy that I worked with in the radio business, and he was a really smart dude and a really talented guy too, but he was a terrible boss. Because his urge to be right overrode everything, and regardless of his talent and his creativity, he didn't last because his ego got in the way. And when leadership gets this right, something subtle happens because people begin, like my boss brought up that time, people begin regulating themselves. Children internalize boundaries. Teams can hold standards without constant oversight. Balance stops being imposed from above and becomes a shared rhythm. That's the real aim. You don't want obedience. You don't want agreement. You want orientation. A system where people know the edges and feel free to react or to act inside of them because they trust the person that holds the center. Taoism is not promising control. It's promising something far better. A way to guide without gripping, correct without crushing, and lead without owning other people's inner lives. So how do we get there? Quickly, I'm going to give you some tips. First, regulate yourself before you regulate others. This might say, look, we're going to pause this conversation and we're going to come back here in a couple of minutes. Just everybody take a breath. The bosses will raise their voice, react really fast, firing off an email, lay down consequences. Take a breath, slow down. Regulate yourself before you try to regulate others. Second, fewer rules, but enforced consistently. In many homes, there's endless rules, screen time rules, tone rules, bedtime rules, and most of them are enforced inconsistently. So children learn which ones matter and which ones don't. Fewer rules, but enforced consistently. Third, correct behavior. Do not identify that person with that behavior. A parent will say, you're being disrespectful, or you're lazy. The manager says, you're unreliable. These statements are attaching an identity to the behavior. Tone matters. This deadline wasn't met. This choice created a problem. Those are okay things to say, right? Put the identity on the issue. Solve the problem, not the person. Fourth, be the model. You can't tell somebody else to calm down if you're agitated. That doesn't work. Okay? You have to be the model. Fifth, you have to allow some autonomy inside the boundaries. Create the edges and let people act within them. When people have freedom inside structure, their ownership of the situation increases. Children feel respected. Employees feel trusted. Mistakes are going to happen, but they learn, and the learning accelerates. These aren't dramatic things, right? But when you do these 5 things, regulate yourself before you regulate others, set fewer rules but enforce them consistently, correct the behavior, don't identify the problem with a person, don't say you are. Take that out of your vocabulary. You are is a dangerous word to say to an employee. Okay? 4th, model the balance that you expect from others. And 5th, allow autonomy inside these clear boundaries. Here's the thing. These don't make you feel powerful. They don't help they don't massage your ego. Over time, though, if you do those 5 things, something shifts. Children stop testing boundaries aggressively. Teams stop posturing, and they start living the culture instead of watching the boss perform. Taoism will never teach you how to dominate. It teaches you how to hold the center, and how, when you do that, leadership stops being a performance and starts being something that others naturally come to you for. Don't try to become soft. Don't try to become strict. If you're a strict person, don't try to soften. If you're a soft person, don't try to get stricter. All of us need to become steadier. Don't worry about soft or strict. Worry about steady, centered, balanced. Leadership is not proven in moments when everything is going well. It shows up when you're tired, you're frustrated, misunderstood. This is where authority either holds or collapses. Being a leader instead of a boss. It's not about control or charisma. It's about coherence. Your actions matching your values, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Regulating yourself before others and before asking others to do the same. Guiding behavior without owning a belief system. These are not soft skills. They are demanding principles that are hard for you. But you have to set a quiet standard. Lead so that people feel oriented, not managed. Correct without humiliating. Allow freedom without abandoning responsibility. Hold boundaries without gripping so tightly. Lead by example. Not as a performance, but as a way of being. If you're a parent, your children are learning leadership from you every day, whether you intend it or not. If you lead at work, your team is watching you handle pressure, watching you handle disagreement, watching you with whether you are restrained or not. What you model becomes how they behave. Transmission matters more than any rule. So as you move forward, don't ask whether you're being firm enough or kind enough. Ask, are you being steady? Are you being consistent? Are you someone others can orient around when the pressure builds, when things get hard, when stuff collapses? Can they rely on you to be steady and consistent and balanced? That is Taoist leadership. And that's going to wrap up this episode today. If this episode was useful to you in any way, please take a moment to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a future conversation. Next week, we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions. I don't think you're going to want to miss that one. It's going to be fun. Maybe not so fun for some people. You can find more writing and reflections and practice at daoananda.org. That's DAOANANDA.org or .com. You can also send me questions for our next Ask Me Anything episode. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year to you and your family, and thank you for being on this journey with me. Please like and follow and subscribe and do all that stuff. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist.
Thanks for listening to The Modern Taoist with Kit Man. Visit us online at dawananda.com or find us on all the socials. Please like or subscribe on this platform, and thanks again.